so much for coming out. This is an impressive turnout. I hope that I make it worth your while. The title of tonight's presentation is Coding in Public. The reason it's called Coding in Public is because I didn't know what I was going to talk about when people asked me for an abstract. And I had a lot of ideas rattling around in my brain based on conversations I had with peers of mine about what we could do better in the community and how we could help improve the state of our industry. And one of the ideas was we need to share code more. My friend Mike Eaton said, I've never seen your code, it totally sucks. I said, well, I assure you it does totally suck, but I will make sure and show you my code. So that's one aspect, one vector of this talk that I knew I was going to do, so I named it this way. But as the talk evolved and I determined what my thesis was, I decided I needed a subtitle. So this talk is not just about exposing your code in public, it's exposing your code that sucks with gusto. Because as a community, we got to support each other in our suckage. Because that's the only way we're ever going to get better. If we don't allow people to make mistakes, if we don't allow them to be imperfect, then they will never get better than where they are today. So I'm Alan, I'm online and stuff, I'm an MVP, an ASP Insider, and that last bullet is very important. I'm not an expert in anything. I do not have deep enough domain knowledge in any area or field to declare myself an expert. So do not take anything I say tonight as me claiming expertise. But I am a huge enthusiast about all things technology and software development related. And I get very passionate about these things. So the ideas I'm sharing are ones that I'm excited about, but I could be completely wrong. Keep that in mind. I love to read interesting books that make me think. I don't have to agree with the conclusions that they come to if they make me think. So if I make you think tonight, and then you decide in the end that I'm wrong, I've still succeeded. I am one of the organizers, somewhat, of CodeStock. I haven't been to a single organizational meeting, but because I live in Knoxville, I'm therefore associated with CodeStock. This will be our second year of having this conference. How many people were at CodeStock last year? Is CodeStock awesome?
Yeah.
Yeah. Was the after party awesome?
Yes.
Oh, all right,
I ended up sleeping there. That's all I know.
Yeah. Jeff even stayed at my house, man. It was the crash pad. Yeah, the after party was at my house. Well, the after party was at my house. So come out, join us. We're going to have 2 days this year. The first day is going to be long-form sessions, 3 to 6 hour sessions. Some introductory sessions, some deep dive sessions. And then we'll have regular sessions on the second day. I will be running open spaces. This is a cross-technology conference. We want to expose people to a range of things. So plenty of .NET, but also anything else we can get. We're still taking submissions through 30th? 30th. Today. 30th. Yeah, so through the 30th. So if you still have some time to get in there. Last year we had a talk on Groovy. I thought that was kind of groovy that we had a Groovy talk, because that's far afield from what a lot of the regional events have. DevLink. Yeah, I'm on the board of DevLink, although I've not attended a single conference call, and I've ignored all the emails. You seeing a pattern? But the real organizers of DevLink are putting together a great event. This will be our 4th year. I like to think of this as a sister event to CodeMash. The CodeMash is in the north, and 6 months later in the south, we have DevLink. This is a big event. It's usually been around 500. I think we may be raising registration to about 650 this year. It's going to go 3 days. And if you see a pattern here, the first day will be long-form sessions, and then the next 2 days will be regular 60 to 75-minute sessions. I highly recommend this event. How many people went to DevLink last year? Was DevLink worth your time?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a great event. I really enjoyed being involved in it. Everything I say to you tonight, you should keep in mind the fact that I've already failed at one profession.
How do you know you failed?
Because I left. I booked out of it. So it may just be a matter of time before I bail on this one. And if you want to look at the face of fear in my unconscious, that's it. I can smell the little kid's smell in the room. I can feel the confinement. And more than anything, I can feel the constant pestering. You can never let down your guard when you have a room full of children. I love to teach. I love to share ideas. I do not like to be locked in a room with other people's children. It's good to know these things. Keep that in mind. Since this session is called Coding in Public, I would be totally remiss if I did not write some code. So let's write some code. I don't have anything on my clipboard. I don't have anything in Notepad. I want you to actually write code. I've given talks for years where I had everything pre-planned, and if anything went wrong, I could pull out a completed version. But when I sit down in front of the editor, that's not what life is like for me. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm figuring out the problem as I'm typing in the keyboard, right? Is that just me? So I think we need to get a little more real when we talk about coding and the way we share writing code. And I think it's important that we be allowed to make fools of ourselves, so I thought I'd be the first on the list to make a fool of myself.
All right.
So this is a site called codekata.com. This gentleman is Dave Thomas from the Pragmatic Programmers. And what this is a collection of exercises that Dave suggests you practice in order to get better at coding. This is Kata 2. Kata 1 was more of just a thought exercise. So this is the first one that actually includes coding. And I've never completed it. So even though I've done this talk the last 2 nights, there will be plenty of opportunity for me to make a fool of myself. The task at hand here is locating a designated integer in an ordered array of integers by finding which half of the array it is in, chopping it in half, and bifurcating the array continuously until you locate it. So that's the task at hand, which means we can't iterate the entire array. We have to figure out which half it is, an ordered array, and find it that way. Dave has created a set of specs down here that I've converted to C# to make life easier for us, since I don't write yet. All right, so this is the way that real life works. File a new project. I'm going to do a test project because that's just the way I roll. And we'll call this Cbus Kata. Or is there a hyphen? Pump that out. Over here, that's generating the template. Is where I have the C# version of those specs. Just drag that over here into our project. So what we have here is an MS test file. And I've commented out all but the first test.
Center that on the screen.
I cannot center that on the screen, I don't think, because let me do this. Let me resize it. We looked at that beforehand. All right. Tell me when I hit the edge of the screen. All right. Just resize that. Better?
Yeah.
All right. There you go. Let me show you a trick with MS Test. MS Test has a bad rep for being slow, and that's because it's really slow. But you can go in here and edit, test edit local test run configuration, and I got no dialog. Okay. If you do not need any resources on disk, if you don't need to go out and get a file on disk, you can turn off deployment here. Huh? I won't mind you. I never have. See this checkbox, enable deployment? What that means is every time you run the test, it's going to copy the binaries that are generated and create into a new folder. And that takes time, and that slows down the rhythm of running your test. So you can turn that off and speed up MS Test. Like if you edit your default template for a test project, you can just have that off by default. So let's run this. And Sanity says we should have a build error because we do not have a chopped method. Notice that chop takes the integer we're looking for and an array of integers and returns the index of that array, and if it can't be found, it returns -1. So we'll go down here and let's just quickly see if ReSharper will do this for me. Apparently it will not. So go down and we'll look at that. And chop takes int target case, it's looking for -1 as a return value. We'll say return -1. Test result is so awesome. See, I didn't have to think, I just had to pass the test. Bang, we passed that test. Great. That one. Control R for run and T for test. Control R, Control T will debug the test. Very handy. In Visual Studio 2005, MS Test did not have keyboard shortcuts, which made it just plain useless to me. All right, so we passed 2 without doing anything but returning -1, which is kind of cool. Go down here and uncomment this next one. Run that. And we failed. All right, so this one takes an int with one integer, 1, and it's looking for 1, so it expects the first element, 0, to be returned. Am I cool with what the task is at hand here? All right, since I've done this the last 2 nights, I'm going to quickly just say, because I'm not really being a big enough fool tonight since I've done this far before. Oh, nice. And there we go. All right. So we're going to say, we're going to switch on the length, right? So if the length is 0, did you see what I just did? That's called real coding, right? That's what I do all day. I watched Anders Hausberg at Mix on the video. He couldn't type the semicolon, right? If Anders can't type the semicolon in public, then I can make a fool of myself, and so can you. We can be real coders, right? All right, so if there's nothing in there, we're going to return -1. That's easy enough. Put a break because my C instructor told me years ago I had to put a break in every case. All right, and then if it's, we'll say case 1. I did it again. Did you see it? Is this just me? You guys don't do this stuff? All right, we'll say case 1, and I'll leave that alone, and then I'll do a default. And I'll return -1 there too, just for handy. Now, in this case, what do I need to do to satisfy this? This one is going to have, it's got 1 element. First element is a 1, and that's what we're looking for. Right? So what do I need to put in here? Anybody? What? Somebody speak up. If the first element is 1, so if nums 0, thank you, Resharper. That was way more brackets than I needed. If that equals 1, then return 0. Right? Hey, guess what? I dropped a semicolon. Anybody see it? Ah, thank you. Again, this is what I do all day long. In the end result, I get software that solves problems for people, but in the process, when the sausage is being made, I get this stuff.
Break.
Ah, see, that's why my instructor told me. And we didn't even pass it. Let's see what we're sending in a 1 element array, and we're looking for 1. If we have 1 element and the first element is equal to 1, we should return 0, and we're expecting to return 0. What in the world happened?
You failed the middle assert.
Oh, sweet. Thank you. Yeah. It's been nice if I'd put these all in different test cases. So we expect -1 if we get a 1 element array, and we're looking for 3, right? So what I should do here is I should probably say else. What?
Just make num 0 equal to target.
All right. Yay. Now, I don't want to belabor this any further than we've gone, but what I'm suggesting, I'm going to talk about a lot of ideas tonight. What I'm suggesting is it all comes down to that we do just that with one another, and we will all learn faster. I know a lot of things about coding, but I don't know everything, and I'm pretty dumb sometimes, obviously. If I sit down with somebody else, I always pick up some new keystroke or some new technique, or they solve the problem differently than I have. I would like for us to find opportunities to do this together more. I think that would be better than shiny PowerPoint. That's just me. Your mileage may vary. Let's go back over. And I find it totally ironic that for 3 nights in a row, I've never gotten past the third assert. I even knew what I was doing at the beginning tonight. Darwin Smith had a law degree from Harvard. And when the board promoted him to CEO, one of the senior board members pulled him aside and told him everything about him that made him unqualified to be CEO and why he opposed Darwin being promoted to CEO. Darwin Smith went on to lead Kimberly-Clark to 15 years of consistent profits, 4 to 7 times better than the market average. By every measure of a CEO, he was an amazing, awesome CEO. And yet, he said, I never stopped trying to become qualified for the job. I think the key to mastery, the key to mastering any skill is exactly that. If I believe I'm an expert, then I'm probably out of date, especially in this industry, right? As soon as I declare expertise, as soon as I say I have deep knowledge, I'm outdated, I'm obsolete. I have to keep trying to become qualified for the job. The pragmatic programmers, Andy Hunt and Dave Thomas, were the first to bring the Dreyfus model to software development. The Dreyfus model was used in research on computer users and on nursing, and it was eventually found to be consistent across all skill domains. Ironically, when I was researching this, I found that the Dreyfus model of skill acquisition was actually developed by guys trying to create an artificial intelligence. So they weren't actually trying to study human skill acquisition, they were trying to teach a computer to acquire a skill. And they developed this understanding of skill acquisition, and then it turns out it maps to all the skill domains. First stage is novice. In fact, we'll just run through these and we're going to unpack them. In the original 1980 paper that wasn't published, but somebody scanned it into a PDF and it's available online, there was no advanced beginner level. It was novice, competent, proficient, expert, and master. I really liked that. I think some politically correct person made them remove master because in the 1987 book, those were the levels they used. A novice in any domain requires a set of rules. They can't really think for themselves. My wife and I just converted to veganism in February, and we got these vegan cookbooks, and I can't improvise on these recipes. I don't look at step 2 until I'm done with step 1. I am a novice at this. I don't really know where we're going. I just know I do step 2. I'm going to measure exactly 2 tablespoons of olive oil, no more, no less. I certainly don't have any judgment about it as an novice. The advanced beginner moves from rules to guidelines. Reminds me of that line from Pirates of the Caribbean. It's more like guidelines. So they have a little more leeway, but they're still following a set of structures. They also make decisions based on attributes and aspects. These are a couple of terms from the Dreyfus model. These are the the way that they make decisions is they apply these attributes and these aspects. These are their kind of touchstones for familiarity in the domain. This one's interesting because they don't know which attributes and aspects are more important, so they have to treat them all the same. Just like with me following the recipe, after I've learned the recipe and I've made it a couple of times, I might decide that if I don't have one ingredient, it won't really affect the dish. In an industry where they cannot strike legally in a labor dispute, what they do is called work to rule. It means that they treat every rule as equally important. And what happens? Progress grinds to a halt. Right? Advanced beginners don't know which is more important, which rules to pitch out in which situation. They treat them all the same. What's important is that all of you are advanced beginner or above, and you will, if you are an advanced beginner now, you will soon move out of it. I know this because you're here. I'm not flattering you, it's a fact. You came out on a weeknight because you're that interested in your domain. When you are talking to a novice and an advanced beginner, remember this. They do not understand that some things are more important than others because they're just trying to solve the problem. Now we start thinking in the larger context of our domain. We're gaining some greater understanding. We're making some plans. Didn't know routinized was an English language word, but there you have it. I remember when I got to this level in software development. It was like a revelation. If we just made up a set of standards and then we all followed those standards, then this would be so much better. I've never seen that work. But at the time, it looked like a great idea. We had a bunch of standards. What do we do? We'll determine what the best practices are, and then we'll all do that. The stage beyond that is proficiency. So now we start seeing things holistically. We've kind of left the aspects and attributes and the rules and the guidelines behind, and we understand our domain well enough that we see whatever task is before us in the context of the entire domain. We know what's most important. We can do a little improvisation because we know what to pitch out in what situation. We know when things don't fit the expected pattern. We know when a problem is outside the norm. And we use maxims whose meanings vary according to the situation for guidance. This drives novices and advanced beginners insane because the same maxim means something different in different contexts. And then they say to us, but you said, and what do we say? It depends, right? And it does. That's a level of understanding where it seems obvious to us, but not to somebody at a lower level of skill acquisition.
Do you have an example of what a maxim would be? Just to understand that.
Somebody give me a maxim from software development or design.
Don't repeat yourself.
What was the first one back here?
Don't repeat yourself.
Don't repeat yourself, right? Unless you should. Corey Haynes said, tests should be moist but not wet. Right, that's a great example. That's a maxim. Don't repeat yourself, except when you should repeat yourself. Right? And I feel confident in making that choice. I don't know a lot of these guys. I think I've met a couple. They've pretty much thrown the rule book out. Well, there are plenty of people throwing the rule books out. These guys justifiably throw the rule book out. Their intuition becomes much more important. In fact, the research shows that an expert, when forced to make an analysis of a situation, makes a worse decision than they do if they go with their first intuitive choice. The way that an expert works is they know their domain, they have enough experience, they know enough situations and enough scenarios that they look at a problem and they just pull from a set of patterns somewhere back in their cerebral cortex, boom, this is like this pattern overlaid with that pattern, therefore we should go in this direction. Thinking without thinking. Malcolm Gladwell has a book called Blink that's all about that idea. And it's fairly interesting. Once again, you don't have to agree with the conclusions. The questions are pretty thought-provoking. What percentage of software developers do you believe to be at the competent range? Yes, Brian?
Is that self-assessment?
Our industry at large. You guys have
People
been...
think they're above that.
Right, okay. Not where do they think they are. Where are they? 30% are competent. About a third. You guys are skeptics. I got a 50% the last 2 nights.
Based on some of the things I've seen, it could be more like 5 or 10.
It could be, yes. It's around 15. This, pragmatic programmers, as I said, were the first to apply the Dreyfus model to software development. Hackos and Stevens did this research with computer users, and these numbers have been shown to be consistent across domains. So, whether we're talking about nurses or airline pilots or physicians or software developers, 60% of the population at any time are advanced beginners. And that's where they stay. My friend Corey Haynes, who I met last year at the Cleveland Day of .NET, contacted me one morning on IM. He said, I figured it out. I said, what? Your problem. I figured it out. I said, okay, what was my problem? He said, it's the Alan Stevens syndrome. I said, first of all, put the bong away, and then tell me what the Alan Stevens syndrome is. Well, the Alan Stevens syndrome, in Corey's assessment, was when you go and you try to make everybody better, and most people don't want to get better. And the result is frustration. Corey's a pretty insightful guy. He had summed up what I'd been doing for the last year and why I wasn't getting where I wanted to get. Yes?
So the acronym for your syndrome is what?
Yes, that's exactly what I was making of myself. I need everybody to improve. Well, this is why. This is why Corey's insight was accurate. And it is unfair of me to judge people at this level that do not want to move to this level. It is completely out of line. Because this is the domain where I want to work up the scale. I couldn't care less about bass fishing. Right? There may be some software developer that's been in the industry 15 years making a good living at this level, but he's a master bass fisher, or basket weaver, or whatever the heck he does in his spare time. Somebody at the advanced beginner level in our industry may be the best deacon their church ever had. And that's where his passion lies, and that's where he's moving up. So it has been important for me, and I'm sharing with you, to recognize that focusing on the entire population just isn't going to go anywhere. How many .NET developers are there in Columbus?
At least a room full.
At least a room full. What percentage of the .NET developers in Columbus are in this room tonight? Very small percentage, right?
The official answer is about 15,000.
15,000. Yeah, we'd need a bigger room if everybody wanted to get up out of this advanced beginner stage. So, these are the facts. I'm laying the groundwork for some of my ideas. This is what they found when they were studying computer users, and it's been found to be consistent across domains. The most interesting thing here is they're never acquiring a more broad-based conceptual understanding of the task environment. Said I was a failed educator. It's a great book by John Holt called How Children Fail. And what he did was he took a sabbatical and he just sat in math classrooms and watched. And what he figured out is what's going on in kids' heads, and it's panic. They don't understand what the problem is or how the solution works. They just know if they follow these steps, sometimes they get the right answer, and sometimes they don't. All they want to do is get it over with. They don't have a more broad-based conceptual understanding of the task environment. In software development, we have a nice shorthand for that. This is what I did the first year in the industry, and it worked then, and I've been doing it every year since. I was once denied the title of senior developer because I didn't have 10 years of experience in the industry. And I went to the VP, and I said, this doesn't make any sense. He said, well, that's what we decided a senior developer is, and you don't have the experience. When you do, you'll get it. I said, but the guys you're giving the title of senior to don't have 15 years of experience. They have 1 year of experience 15 times. And he didn't argue with me, that it was a military organization, and you don't move up in rank until you put your time in. So I've worked in a lot of code bases, and I have found this to be consistent across the board, that most apps are built the way that somebody learned to solve a problem a long time ago, and they've taken that hammer and they've beaten everything else like it's a nail ever since. In fact, I think that I've made a career of going into those code bases and cleaning them up so they can be changed in unexpected ways. Maybe I should be grateful for this, but it's a fact and it's not going away. So this is what it comes down to. We all go to work, right? Even if you're a 501 developer, you still go to work every day. That's 40 hours a week. Right? It's 2,000 hours a year. But they're still not getting any better. What's going on? Well, I wouldn't be here if I didn't have an idea. This is from a book called Mastery by George Leonard. This was a favorite book of mine in the 90s. I gave a copy of it to my brother when he graduated high school. I love this book. And it's interesting to come around and have these ideas applied to the work I'm doing today. Well, not really the work. This is my play. But going out and trying to share my ideas about software development. What this graph shows us is that you get better at something, and then you get a little worse and you sit on a plateau. And you don't know when or why, but at some point you start getting better again, and then it falls off some more. What someone pointed out to me the other night is that actually as you move to the right, this plateau gets longer each time. Right? You get diminishing returns. George Leonard has some characters. This guy might sound familiar. This guy got a degree in education and went off to be a teacher, and then he got frustrated and he dropped off. And he said, I'm going to start a landscaping business. Then he found out that you can't build much in the winter as a landscaper, so dropped off. And so at this point in our story, our hero is about right here. Software development. What does the future hold? This guy is not going to let any plateau hold him down. When he stops seeing progress, he's going to get up earlier, he's going to work twice as hard, he's going to totally burn himself out. Here's our advanced beginner. I put the term hacker in quotes because that's the term that George Leonard uses, but that's not a pejorative in our domain. This is where 60% of the population is. And I'm talking about your physicians and the guy flying your airline plane and every field. They got a little better, they got a little better, or they got good enough. And then they're good, you know. And that's not even an insult. They're doing something else. It's just not their primary domain that they're really putting their energy into. But I'm interested in the people that want to go beyond that. I'm interested personally in going beyond that, and I assert that all of you are as well, because you're here. I don't know squat about golf, but this guy is beautiful. Look at the intensity. He was trained since he was a child, sitting in a high chair to play golf by his father. And he was really good. But in order to get better, he had to get worse. He took his swing apart. He stepped back in order to go forward. And a few years later, he did it again. He took his swing apart in order to get better. And that's what we're talking about here. I had a friend in college, because I was a failed educator. I started as a music educator with a focus in trumpet. Now, my roommate played trumpet as well. And he had this gorgeous fat tone. He had just perfected this beautiful sound. Yet he lacked some technique and he lacked some range. And his instructor said he's going to have to change his embouchure, change the way he holds his bones in his muscles, and change his embouchure. And so he did. And it was painful to watch because he lost that beautiful tone. In fact, he wasn't a very good trumpet player for a while after that. But that's what it took to move off the plateau he was on to the next level. I have said for 3 nights now that I was going to give an attribution to this because I found out where this came from. This comes from the General Motors Management Training Group. I even heard the name. I'll find it. The idea of this chart is that we all have a comfort zone, an area where we're confident, we know what's going on, we're not in any way at risk. Outside of that is an area where we have potential to learn. These are where the things we don't know exist, just outside our comfort zone, in the learning zone. We're a little bit off balance there, but we're not falling over on our face. Out here is the panic zone, and that's where we freeze up, and we don't do any learning. We've got to deal with some uncertainty. We've got to learn to be uncomfortable if we want to grow. That's where the opportunities are. And what we have to do is avoid going here and avoid taking others there. All about survival. So, in my experience, this is when I come up to somebody and I start talking to them about, oh, you don't do testing, you should do test-driven development. You should learn to use a mock frame. In fact, you should do dependency injection and use an inversion of control container. I have taken them from their comfort zone way out in their panic zone. That or they flipped the bozo dead on this guy. When we're talking to people, we have to look at where they are and speak to them at that level in order to bring them along. Masters remember, throw the rule book out. We can't tell novices, in order to be a master, throw the rule book out. It doesn't work that way. So I have a theory on all of this. And I had it printed out and I left it in Cincinnati, so I apologize. That was on my list today, was to go print this out, but we'll just do it here. You guys can read along. I'll need recent files. Oh, I know. It's under my live mesh folder. All important things. You agree? You guys use this? It's awesome. See, there it is. And it's so legible, too. This story comes from the book Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind. It's by Shunryu Suzuki Roshi, who's one of the first Zen masters to come to the U.S. and set up schools in California. And I will read it to you now. You can read along if you like. In our scriptures, it is said that there are 4 kinds of horses. Excellent ones, good ones, poor ones, and bad ones. The best horse will run slow and fast, right and left, at the driver's will, before it sees the shadow of the whip. The second best will run as well as the first one does, just before the whip reaches its skin, but the third one will run when it feels pain on its body. The fourth will run after the pain penetrates to the marrow of its bones. You can imagine how difficult it is for the fourth one to learn how to run. Does this sound familiar to you? Does this sound anything like the Dreyfus model? When we hear this story, almost all of us want to be the best horse. If it is impossible to be the best one, we want to be the second best. This is, I think, the usual understanding of the story and of Zen. You may think that when you sit in Zazen, which is the sitting meditation posture in Zen, you will find out whether you are one of the best horses or one of the worst ones. Here, however, there is a misunderstanding of Zen. If think the aim of Zen practice is to train you to become one of the best horses, you will have a big problem. This is not the right understanding. If you practice Zen in the right way, it does not matter whether you are the best horse or the worst horse. When you consider the mercy of the Buddha, how do you think Buddha will feel about the 4 kinds of horses? He will have more sympathy for the worst horse than for the best one. When you are determined to practice Zazen with the great mind of the Buddha, you will find the worst horse is the most valuable. In your very imperfections, you will find the balance of your firm way seeking mind. Those who can sit perfectly physically usually take more time to obtain the true way of Zen, the actual feeling of Zen, the marrow of Zen. But those who find great difficulties in practicing Zen will find more meaning in it. So I think that sometimes the best horse may be the worst horse, and the worst horse can be the best one. Why did I read you that story? Remember the idea of the comfort zone and the learning zone, the panic zone. If you are already good at something, if you can sit cross-legged and look cool, you don't want to lose that, do you? Right? You don't want to go backwards if you're already good. Then you've got something to lose. But if you can't sit cross-legged to begin with, what have you got to lose? You're already off balance just to begin with. You're already in the learning zone, and you are comfortable in the learning zone. What the research tells us is that talent, or as they call it, precociousness in childhood, does not correlate to adult success at all. Talented children don't want to mess it up. Gifted children don't want to look stupid. But those that aren't gifted or talented, well, they can just keep on practicing because they're comfortable not being perfect to begin with. None of this is supported by the research. They don't know why some people move out of the advanced beginner stage and some don't. But I think that this has some validity. If you apply Suzuki Roshi's story and you apply the idea of the learning zone, then I think we can come to some understanding that if we allow ourselves to be comfortable in the learning zone and we make it safe to be in the learning zone, then we will learn more faster. But that means that I have to stop pretending to know it all. I'm a C-sharp MVP. That means that I'm comfortable in about 60% of the language. You get to any edge cases, man, and I'm no help at all to you. Right? But I can't, if I keep pretending that's not the case, talking to Leon last night, he's teaching me all kinds of things about C-sharp that I don't know. If I pretend that's not the case, I don't help you learn, and I don't learn, because I'm too busy being cool. So let's talk about what expertise is then, because that's what we've been talking about, like we know what it means in our industry to be an expert. Here's what the researchers determined expertise to be. What does this mean in software development? Sincerely, I'm asking you. What does it mean in software development to have performance consistently superior to your peers? What does that look like?
Stuff compiles on the first try.
Compiles on the first try. If it compiles, let's go home. What's superior performance? What would world-class performance be in software development? It's not so easy in our domain. When we're talking about chess and we're talking about ballet and we're talking about playing the violin, it is very easy to measure. In our more complex domain, it's very difficult to measure. What does superior performance look like?
Elegant code that works.
Elegant code that works.
Solve some
I
problems.
like that definition because I think I know what it means. Except, what is elegance? What is elegant code?
It handles new and unexpected.
It's what?
It handles new and unexpected requirements or changes gracefully without lots
Okay,
of
so superior performance is someone who writes code that works that can change in unexpected ways. All right, I'm good with that. Anybody want to dispute? Yes?
I was using a different angle.
breaking down a complex problem into simple solutions.
Breaking down a complex problem into simple solutions. So that falls into that range of looking at a problem, applying some patterns, and seeing where it should go through the depth of experience and understanding.
When you're an expert, you'll be able to recognize elegant code when you see it.
That's it. If only I were an expert. God. I can think without thinking and recognize expertise. I think elegant code is like code smells. I know it when I see it, right? You know, I know when something's not right in the code, and I know when something's really good in the code. Yes?
I think elegant code is the code that solves the problem in the easiest, most direct way possible.
Okay. And I don't dispute that. I think so. You know, I think that code that is soluble, that is code that tells a story, a narrative, so that I can open the file and know what it's trying to do. Not how it does it, but what it tells a story to me about what it's trying to do. I think that's elegant. Yes?
I've heard the definition that said you should be able to open your code up and read it to somebody over the phone. It should make sense.
I agree. I believe that code should tell a story. Like once there was a record in the database, and that record was a customer. And that customer wanted to purchase an item that was this parameter name of purchase item, right? And that item was found to be in inventory, right? How all that got implemented is irrelevant to our story. And if you break that down fine enough, then when you actually get to the how, you open up a method, and it's obvious because it's just a few lines of code, right? It said, get the record with this ID. All right, I sincerely think it's important for us to consider these ideas as we talk about expertise like we know what it means. This is what the research tells us about how to become an expert. It's a replicable process. Here's all you need. And not just any practice. As we've said, you can do 2,000 hours a year of coding and still not get better. A specific kind of intensive practice. You have to have devoted teachers. You have to have enthusiastic support. In most of the research, they're talking about children that are in homes where they're supported. Tiger Woods' father teaching him golf. Me driving my daughter to ballet and missing work a few hours a week. That kind of thing. Let's talk about the kind of practice that the research finds to be valuable. This is not what I do when I play guitar. I'm definitely on that plateau, the advanced beginner, the hacker, when it comes to guitar. Because all I do is just learn a song that's kind of like a song I knew before and just keep going and racking up more songs. I don't actually get that much better. I actually took lessons once. I took 2 lessons. I've been playing guitar for 10 years and I decided I'd get some real training. And after 2 lessons I said, this is not for me, because that guy wanted to tell me what to play. And I wasn't having any of it. Deliberate practice requires that there be someone that knows what they're doing to help set you on the right path, to help show you where your weaknesses are and what you need to focus on. This is why teachers are so important, mentors. You have to move out into your learning zone. Deliberate practice means that we are not just doing what's fun and feels good. Right? We're actually working on the things where we're weakest. Because that's what's going to get us there. And we have to be brutally honest about where those weaknesses are. That's why I say we have to drop the facade. We have to code in public. We have to allow ourselves to suck with gusto. It's got to be okay. You know? It's the way it is anyway. I mean, I suspect if I looked over your shoulder when you were coding, it'd look a lot like what I was doing before. Oh, damn, I put the colon on the wrong side. Oh, man, this is cut off over here. You can't see it. Look, you can look over. Oh, it's cut off on both of them. This is not cool. All right, I'm going to let you guys see this because this is awesome. You guys see that over here, the teacher is standing here and she's at the bar here, but from the angle of the photographer, she's right behind her. You see that? I thought that was just wicked cool, and it sums up everything that this slide is about. We have to retrospect on what we're doing. We can't call it deliberate practice unless we look at what worked and what didn't in order to get better. Attention to reflection and form. This is not stuff that our managers give a flip about, right? This is not what merit pay is based on. This is the kind of thing we do because we care, because it's important personally. Now, another thing I like about this picture is if you'll notice, her foot is over her head. What the hell? I do yoga and that freaks me out. This isn't fun. In fact, it's exhausting. The research shows that even the best, most devoted students can't do more than 5 hours of deliberate practice consistently. 2 to 4 is more common. And it's exhausting because it uses your mental resources. One plus side of that is, when I have to do rote things, I never enter that state called flow, that elusive state. This is how I always visualize it, right? I have all of the method names and all of the variables in my head and all the classes and interactions, right? And there I am, suspending them all. And that's when my boss says, hey, can you look at something for a minute? But flow requires a challenge. If it's not at least somewhat challenging, we never get into that state that's actually satisfying. It's actually pleasurable. By the way, the book Flow is written by this Russian guy with a name that goes chicken, right? But in an audiobook I heard that it's Csikszentmihalyi. Throw that out at a cocktail party. Well, Csikszentmihalyi says, it's exhausting because you have to constantly focus on where you're not doing what you want to do and think about how it can be better. You have to think, think, think. One of the research studies sent novice vocalists to a voice lesson and trained vocalists to a voice lesson, and then interviewed them afterwards. The novices thought it was a stressful. It was fun. They got to sing for an hour. The trained vocalists found it grueling and exhausting because they were so intensely focused. They knew where they needed to improve, and they focused exclusively on that area for an hour. That's what this is talking about. If you're just sitting up here strumming the guitar like I was, you're not going to get any better no matter how long you do it. Or if you're sitting at the keyboard for 40 hours a week, 2,000 hours a year, you're not going to get better just by doing your job. If you want to be world class, some trends have been found. You want to be an Olympic athlete, you want to be a violin soloist, what have you, it is consistent. This is what it takes, this is all it takes, anybody can do it. It's 4, 6, 10. You ready to get started?
If I did Microsoft, they had a date.
True. So we need to focus beyond just the technology. Mastering WPF isn't enough, is it? We have to think about the larger context of our profession, and those things will come and go. Technologies will come and go. The good news for us is we don't necessarily have to do that. But what if we devoted 2 hours a week to deliberate practice, focusing on the areas where we're weak and we can improve? Working with a mentor. What if we had a community that was a supportive environment that enabled that kind of behavior and allowed people to make mistakes and expose where their ignorance lies? I know squat about in Hibernate. And if I want to pretend to be a cool alt.netter, I can't say I know squat about in Hibernate. Never used it, don't know how to. Right? That's okay. By starting there, I might actually learn something. So here's what I propose. I propose propose that we just make it a standard in our community that we support one another. And when people are wrong, we tell them we're wrong, but we don't insult them. We don't make ad hominem attacks. If somebody has a question or an idea, we don't insult them for the ignorance of their question. I always told my user group, back when I ran a user group, which I was a novice at, and never got beyond advanced beginner, I assure you, that everybody in the room is an expert in something. You all know something I don't know. And I would have them come up and do a 15-minute show and tell. Somebody showed this thing with SQL Server and Excel that I never knew existed. It was great. It totally proved everything I said. They may not know everything I know, but they know something I don't know. And we need to encourage that, encourage getting people out there into their learning zone. You, yes you, every one of you can be a mentor. By the very fact you're here, you show a spark, which means you have learned something that you can teach to someone else. If you are an advanced beginner, you can teach a novice. If you are competent or proficient, you can teach an advanced beginner. If you are an expert, God bless you, we won't understand a word you're saying. This is where I want to focus my efforts, is cataloging simulations and case studies, because what the research shows is in complex domains like business and chess, it is difficult to see the results of any decision in isolation. But if you have a case study in which the right decision was made, and you give it to someone and have them solve the problem, and then you look at how they solved it differently than the master did, then they can learn to change their behavior based on that. So you can study law cases without actually trying all those cases, correct? You can make stock picks based on information, and you can see what the stock actually did without actually losing any money. The closest thing I've found in software development is Michael Feather's book, Dealing Effectively with Legacy Code. It's the only book I've ever opened and recognized in the real world of my career day to day, because he talked about really crappy code and ways to fix it. In this case, you would do this. In this case, you would do that. I would like to catalog some of these and do some simulations where we actually code against some of these issues and how we solve them. It's our job as a community to provide a supportive environment. De facto. That's it. No more. I'm not tolerating this stuff of if you don't get it 100%, you're an idiot. I'm intolerant. I'm unsupportive of that. If you see a spark in somebody, I believe it's your responsibility, if you have that same spark, to be a mentor to them in some form, to help them out. And we all of us, have to be willing to receive the kind of unsentimental feedback that will help us get better. Don't candy coat it. Don't insult me ad hominem. Tell me the truth. The best students seek out the harshest, most critical instructors, because they know that's the fastest route to where they want to be. Well, we don't have to be harsh. We can just be honest. We can be fair. Somebody besides Brian Prince scored some geek points and tell me what this is. What's the Kobayashi Maru back there?
Star Trek, final test of Starfleet. You're put in a situation where you cannot win, but you are judged on how you deal with it.
That's exactly what it is. Kobayashi Maru is the, very good.
He's an expert.
Yeah, it's the final exam. It's a no-win scenario in which you are judged based on how you respond to the inability to succeed. Some people handle it better than others. Kurt rigged the computer, so yeah, so somehow that's okay with him. But I think a collection of these kind of scenarios, outside the stress of actually having to deliver and having a client beating on your door and a manager looking over your shoulder, would be useful for us to have to code against when we get together. I'm a bit tired of all of this talking. I run open spaces and we talk. And we have the same conversation every time. Right? But the good ideas, I like the conversation. well, why don't we just flip the laptop open and stop talking so much about something abstract, and let's talk about the code that's in front of us at the moment. Let's put together some scenarios. Any ideas you have, I want to hear about this, because this is where I want to focus my energy. Here's the ones I found so far. The Code Caucus, I showed you one of those. A Code Dojo is like a Saturday code camp, except what you do is you promiscuously pair. You take a problem and something you're going to implement. A pair starts out up here implementing it. Then one of them sits down and somebody else in the audience gets up. They code for a while. The other original person sits down, and you cycle throughout the day, solving a problem together. And it's okay if you suck. Because the goal is not to solve the problem before the end of the day. The goal is to code together and learn from one another. Michael Wood in Cincinnati has started what he calls bit slingers, which grew out of something that Leon Gershing said, that in the .NET community, we measure your merit based on whether you're a loudmouth that stands up and talks in front of people. Oh, he cuts me. Whereas in the open source world, it's measured on what your contributions are to an open source project. What have you done? What is your code like? So what Mike has done is he started saying, hey, I'm going to be at Panera Bread between these hours, and I want to work on this open source project. If you got something you want to work on, or if you want to work with me, come on and hang out. Come and go as you're available, and let's code. I think that's a fabulous idea. I registered bitslingers.org. I still haven't put anything up there, but I plan to because I want to do this in Knoxville, and I want to promote people doing more of this. Call it a programmer's salon. You just sit around and we share information. This is what's important to us, and we might provide some documentation to some open source projects that are desperately in need of it. So consider that. And the last one, the one that I got from Aaron Jensen, I'm calling it Code Spark, but at the All.NET Seattle Summit, Aaron ran this thing in the evening where people wrote little bots that played rock, paper, scissors against one another. And then he had this runtime called Compete, in which you would see them battling it out, and oh, this one gets in the lead and it wins, right? And people are cheering and talking smack, and over time they're learning the weaknesses of their code, their competitors. They're putting case statements in there. Oh, if it shows this behavior, then nail it, because I know it's a weak spot. And that just sounds like a hell of a lot of fun to me. A fellow named David Starr, who has elegantcode.com, I had lunch with him last week, and he has something called Robo Dojo that is based on something in the Java world to do the same kind of thing. I've heard this done with rock, paper, scissors, and with the game Battleship. But I think it'd be nice to have a group of these kind of activities so that when we have a day of .NET, or we have a code camp, or some get-together, we have a corner over there where we're doing this. And we're having a raucous good time writing code in front of each other, and there's no stress. It's entirely fun. Even if you lose, you haven't really lost anything, because you got to hang out with some other coders and enjoy your craft for a while. What's interesting about this quote is that Jim Collins was not talking about any of the stuff that I've talked about tonight. He wasn't talking about expertise. He wasn't talking about skill acquisition. He studied businesses that beat the market for 15 years straight. They went from okay to great. And what he determined is it didn't have anything to do with where they started, didn't have anything to do with the industry they were in, didn't have anything to do with how good their competition was. He found a replicable pattern. Greatness is largely a matter of conscious choice. That's exactly what the research on skill acquisition says. If you do these things, and you want to do them, you will get better. And we can all create a culture together where that's all right. One ironic thing about Good to Great, even though I love this book, is one of the case studies was Circuit City. What that proves is that if you stop doing what makes you great, you can start sucking pretty quickly. Up until 1999, Circuit City owned their market, and then Best Buy ate their lunch. So I highly recommend this book. Doesn't have anything to do with software development. It's a fantastic book if you're interested in organizational change. There's a couple of concepts in there that I think apply to what we've been talking about tonight. One is the hedgehog concept, which is coming out of the work that these companies did. They figured out, hey, we could be the best in the world at X, whatever it is. It wasn't some goal plucked out of a hat. They just realized, hey, we could really be good at this thing. And then they focused their energy on it. The other is the flywheel concept. That is, they did it over time, and they saw very little result. You know, every overnight success has 10 years of work behind it. They pushed on this flywheel, and they pushed on it, and they pushed on it until the momentum carried them over the top. This is the book Mastery that I quoted earlier. That's what my copy looks like. This is what you get now from Amazon.com. That's what the real copy looks like. Very short little book. I highly recommend it. George Leonard started practicing Aikido at the age of 50. And a lot of these concepts in here weren't based on any of the research that I was quoting from. They were just his observations from practicing Aikido, and it mapped perfectly to the research. This book by Jeff Coleman is based on the research I've been quoting, and it's an exposition on it. The ideas are expanded, and then he does something very nice. He applies them to the business world. How can we take all of these ideas that have been proven in the research and apply them to the world where most of us live, which is not becoming a chess grandmaster or a violin soloist or a prima ballerina, but just trying to be a better manager. And honestly, what I thought when I read this book was Toastmasters. If you've ever done Toastmasters, it is nothing but an hour of deliberate practice every week. You run a meeting every week, and you get really good at running meetings. And you speak in front of an unsentimental, supportive, critical audience every week, and you get better at speaking. It's just a simple pattern, and you do that over time, and you improve. I've seen it happen. I saw somebody, I was his counter one day. I gave up at like 36 ums. Right? By the time he gave his last speech in our club, he had no ums at all. He knew what he was going to talk about, and he said it. This book is, I think, very worth spending your time on because it applies it to a similar domain to software development. Just for fun, you should read Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell, which just takes the same research and tells a good story. I really like the book. I just think this one has more application to our domain. Here are the papers that I've been referencing. The second one is the best condensation of all of these ideas, making of an expert. And I'll give Carrie the PowerPoint, but that's a link to the paper. Those are, I think, all worth your time. I want to close with a couple of thoughts. Normal people are advanced beginners. Experts are weird. I had the pleasure of meeting the inventor of the wiki, Ward Cunningham, while I was at alt.net CS. And I mean, I just totally admire this guy. This guy put together to me the relationship between test-driven development and refactoring and how it makes a virtuous cycle. I had the eureka moment listening to this guy, and I was able to thank him to his face. He said, well, do you practice test-driven development today? I said, yeah, but I suck at it. He said, well, we all do. He was great. He was a master. He was also a bit odd in ways that I can't characterize. You know, he showed all the telltale signs, the way that he talked about things, and he used metaphor and story and these things. But he was also just a bit quirky. And you know what? That should be expected. Einstein was a bit quirky too. Anybody that masters anything gets quirky. Master musicians have all kinds of rituals they go through about how their diet and how they handle things and how they prepare for a performance, right? You're going to have to give up being cool if you want to move up that skill higher. You're going to have to be a little weird.
Well, that's asking a lot from computer geeks.
Yeah, you're already interested. That's true. Not me. I fit in with the crowd. All right. This thought came to my mind while I was reading the research about how experts' minds operate, how the biochemical, bioelectrical processes work in their brain. Quote from the Tao Te Ching. This obviously leaves me out. But what the research showed was that experts couldn't explain what they could do. They could just do it. And in a novice's brain, it was stimulated all over when they were solving a problem. And in an expert's brain, it was stimulated in very specific areas. Like they had run that path and they knew right where to go to solve the problem. The interesting thing was those areas of the brain were non-verbal. That's why they couldn't talk about what they did. That's why they couldn't talk about how they solved the problem. That's why they could throw out the rules and the maxim, because the rules and maxims are all verbiage. And they don't apply when you really understand. And this makes me think of the way masters talk and tell stories. Jesus said the kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed. It's not like a mustard seed at all. But how do you talk about something that doesn't have words? Right? You talk in metaphor. And you talk in stories. So you don't say, I'm the greatest C# programmer that ever lived. What I discovered talking to Ward Cunningham and Jim Newkirk is they would just reference some experience they had. Or they'd make a suggestion. Well, if you're going to go down that path, you might want to consider these factors. And just leave it at that. No bragging. That's what that means, I believe. And I really like that idea. I'd like to someday, in some domain, get there in my own life. Thank you very much for your time this evening. Any questions or comments about any of the information tonight? I'll be hanging around, probably going to get beer later if we want to talk about this further. The books? Yeah, the books are Good to Great by Jim Collins and Mastery by George Leonard and Talent is Overrated by Jeff Cole. This is the reading list. I'm going to give some slides to Gary. So this is Mastery by George Leonard. And then this one's actually a current one. It's very popular right now. Talent is Overrated. So please feel free to send all claims to any of those contact points. Yes.
Do you have any thoughts on, or did the research indicate anything about that majority is going to stay at the advanced interval?
Right.
You know, personally, I can't understand being there for my career. I mean, like, if I didn't want to go above that, I'd be like, I'm going to have to get another career that I will go above.
Yes.
Was there any discussion of like why that?
Yes, the discussion said they don't know why some people, and they can't determine why some people move beyond that, which is why I told the story of the fastest horse and the slow horse, because that's the best explanation I can find from a master, that those who are off balance to begin with are comfortable being off balance and comfortable being in their learning zone. I came into this profession with no formal training. I actually taught myself system administration. One day I got a gig, and I walked in, and I looked at what they needed, and I said, you guys need a database. And they said, you can do that, right? So I went to Barnes & Noble, got the O'Reilly book, and learned about doing DDL with SQL, and I was off. Man. Right? So I've always been trying to be qualified for the job, and maybe that's not the case for me. Any other comments, questions?
You'll never get it back now. It's going to get passed around the room.
You say that ominously, it's like they
You didn't get that.
they haven't fixed it much yet.
They were there shedding all the talent.
Well, I don't know if you saw John Keller just had a tweet up and he got a job.
So where?
He didn't say where. He said it.
Oh, really?
It was like, I mean, literally 15 minutes.
That's awesome. You were telling me earlier that Progressive's got a bunch of jobs. Well, I mean, there's that downside there.
Yeah. I actually interviewed that. College stuff, like, it was some economics thing, but it was all like, you did something. I'm sure I experienced some computer stuff. It takes you years to learn spreadsheet. That's what they would do.
Way to sell the dream.
But it was like taking insurance data, putting it into a spreadsheet, recording stuff. I'm like, you know what? That sounds like. Hey, they're like, come to this for an interview. I'm like, no thanks. I have no other film projects lined up all the time, but I don't want that one. It's like, yeah, they're gonna try another one. Where other people want to see
I've never seen you play guitar not on the bed.
That just doesn't sound right. Somebody tweet that quick. Overheard Brian Brent. I've never seen you not play guitar on a bed.
So play guitar not on the bed.
Is there something we don't want to know about?